Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Smarter HR podcast, or welcome back if you've joined us in the past, and thank you for doing so. This is a pod where people representing organizations that sometimes might compete with each other find common ground and work together and share their insights from different points of view. My name is Steve Plime. I have a staffing and recruiting company called Talent Team, and I'm pleased to be moderating today's episode. Smarter HR is hopefully a podcast where everybody learns a little something and comes away with something a little bit more to think about. So let's get around the room and introduce one another. We have our presenter today is Stephanie. Maybe you'd get us started.
Yeah, first I do want to say I always feel like I walk away from these just a little bit smarter. Mm-hmm. But with that, Stephanie Lyon, I am with Stratus HR. I am a business development consultant, and Stratus HR, we do outsourced HR.
Ron?
Rod Lacey, CEO and founder of Sunstone HR. We are fractional HR services for primarily small businesses.
And we have a special guest for a couple of our podcasts here for a few months. Kathleen, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Yes, thanks. I'm happy to be here. I'm Kathleen Warren. I'm an employment law attorney, management side, with the global law firm of Ogletree Deakins.
Very good. Thank you, guys. So for our viewers, our listeners and viewers, smash that follow button. Whether you're on Spotify or you're on YouTube, it'll help you stay abreast of what we're up to, and it'll help the pod. So thank you for doing so. All right, so we have a opportunity to learn from Stephanie today. Your topic is one of those issues that's really becoming important in the workplace. It has to do with mental health.
Yeah, so mind at work. I mean, that could be a lot of things. I first want to start with my motivation for this episode actually came from a conversation with a client of mine that created a podcast. Not only are they doing a podcast, but they created a podcast to help themselves become better connected with their employees, especially the ones who travel and are off-site. And an episode they did was mental health. And they are in the trades and pretty taboo, a lot of stigma around individuals talking about their mental health. And it was a great episode where, they got very candid about their own struggles. And although today we are not going in that direction, I thought that it would be great coming off of the last episode that I led, AI, will it survive the AI revolution? It felt like it was kind of a nice step into that. So with that, last time when we talked about can HR survive the AI revolution, I feel like there was a thread that we didn't pull on. We talked about, potentially mass layoffs, restructuring of positions, really the reshaping of the workforce in general. And we didn't really talk about the implications that has on the workforce itself. So picking back up from that, I'm actually going to start out with a question for everybody here. Do we think that the elimination of jobs driven by AI has created more stress in the workforce? And bear with me, it's kind of a three-pronged question. Or because we're in the early days of it, is the full scope of AI's impact unknown? And do you think that we're on the cusp of a much larger mental health crisis that hasn't fully arrived yet?
Can I say yes and yes?
Yes.
Yeah, it obviously has displaced some people, right, already. And you keep hearing people talk about how scary it is, people who should know what they're saying. And that it's going to really eviscerate a lot of jobs. I don't know, but it doesn't seem to me like it ought to be that scary. But I think it's frightening for a lot of people. Talk about mental health.
Yeah.
I guess from my perspective, I'm hopeful that we have seen the worst of it. We've seen layoffs at unprecedented levels. We've seen organizations shifting and adapting because of the efficiencies that might be gained by AI, which means the people left behind are expected to do more with less, fewer bodies, which raises the stress, which hurts mental health. I hope that we are at that breaking point where we start to see some normalization and some getting back to a better work environment. But today it feels just so upside down and uncertain. That's its own little crisis in and of itself.
Well, I think we are just on the cusp of it. I think we're just beginning to see it. I think, was it Friday, Oracle sent 20 or 30,000 6 a.m. emails saying thank you, but you've been replaced. So I think that creates a lot of uncertainty. And in that uncertainty, am I going to wake up to a 6 a.m. email is very stressful on your nervous system. You don't know what's coming. So I think we're on the cusp of it. We're just beginning to see the first wave. And I do think that it does create a lot of uncertainty. And how will the layoff be handled? Am I just going to open my email at 6 a.m. and say, thanks, don't come into work today? So I think we're there. More is coming, and we really do need to be attuned to the mental health of our workforce.
Yeah. I agree with all points. I think for some individuals, it might create some excitement, ways to enhance what they do. But I think for a majority of the people, just the shifting and eliminating of jobs, again, what does it do to a person's sense of self? And for many people, we know that work isn't just about income. It's about identity. It's about purpose. It's about belonging. And when those things feel threatened or uncertain, the mental health costs are real. So I'm going to throw some stats at you. So in 2020, SHRM had published that over $1 trillion was lost in productivity annually due to mental health. So 2020, we know that's the start of COVID. That makes sense. I did find another statistic. 2023, $52 billion. So I'd initially wondered, is that $1 trillion? Did it go up because of maybe some of all the other factors? It looks like it went down, and they're indicating, it's due to loss of productivity and insurance claims. Just a few more stats to lean into here. So looking at Health and Human Services, they are identifying that 76% of U.S. workers reported at least one mental health symptom in the workplace. 84% said that the workplace conditions actually contributed to mental health challenge. 81% said that they would actually seek out other workplaces that better support mental health in the future. So I think looking at these numbers, we know that there's already an issue. There's already been a rising issue over the years. As I thought through this, even the military recognizes the importance of trying to address mental health because they know if a soldier is struggling, it affects their performance. Being a wife of somebody who's in the military, when he was deployed, it was important for them to ask how I was doing because they knew that if the spouse is not doing well at home, that is going to create stress for the soldier that's abroad. So, why does this all matter? If we take this back to the workplace, it matters because when productivity drops, profitability follows.
But the promise of AI is that productivity is going to increase. So don't you wonder, you said some people are excited about it, like the CFO?
I think, yeah, good point. Maybe the CFO or maybe those that this is new, this is a challenge, maybe they want to lean into having themselves stand out in their skill set by really leaning into it.
Well, it makes you wonder if you're the CFO or your leadership of the company and you see these opportunities for AI in your business, where are the opportunities going to where's the cost for these opportunities going to land? It's going to land on the people who lose their jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you wonder if when they say these things, AI, oh, it's going to be great. The kind of unspoken part of that is a whole bunch of people are going to lose their jobs. And you wonder what impact that has on the rest of them. Like Kathleen was just talking about getting a bunch of 6 a.m. emails. What about the people who are left over in that organization who didn't get that email? Are they thinking, I wonder if I'm next?
And I think it's been established that some organizations they're AI washing. They're using AI as the excuse to make cuts, regardless of the reality of what productivity might be enhanced. It's a convenient excuse, in the same way that COVID was a convenient excuse for organizations to restructure and shift and change, and blame a third party. It's interesting.
Boy, it splatters all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I was digging into some research, I found that the Surgeon General has a framework for mental health place well-being. Did anybody here know that the Surgeon General had a framework? Okay. So this framework, it outlines the essentials every organization should be building towards. So the first, protection from harm. So ensuring that physical, psychological safety, including injury, illness, discrimination, bullying, harassment, that those things aren't happening. The second is connection and community. So fostering a positive social interaction and relationships within the workplace. The third is work-life harmony. So providing autonomy over work and tasks with flexible schedules and access to paid leave. Mattering at work, recognizing and valuing the contributions of employees to create a sense of purpose and belonging, and then opportunity for growth. Employees want to know that, that their skill set matters and their work matters, and that what they do is contributing to the goal of the organization, and there's room for them to grow. So looking at that framework, Rod, from a HR leadership lens, what stands out to you?
So having never seen this framework before, I love it. I think I've been in HR for a long time, on the corporate, now the consulting side. If I could have had this list to craft my strategy for the year, it encompasses, everything to do with engagement, motivation, taking care of the employees. I think it's a great list. I think more organizations should refer to this as they strategize. I set goals for my team every year, and among those goals were, an engaged workforce, a productive workforce, a protected workforce. But I love the positioning of these bullets, and this should be included.
Does it feel a little bit like Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
There's no question. Yeah, for people to be their best, they've got to have these essentials satisfied.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Steve, when you look at what companies are doing day to day, how close do you think we are to this framework, and where are the biggest gaps?
Oh, wow. Well, this whole mental health has become more of a topic kind of lately-ish, right? So if I went to a bunch of my clients and said, have you ever heard of the Surgeon General promoting these things? I don't think a lot of them would say yes. And so I think we've got some work to do. But if we're this whole mental health thing is not just hocus pocus. It's real. And if we're going to really be, look at this openly, we're going to have to, I think, say to ourselves that it may not get better right away, and that we maybe should take it a little more seriously. So like Rod, I think this is a great checklist.
Yeah. Now, Kathleen, you bring a different lens. Where do you see organizations struggling and getting mental health support wrong?
Aha. Well, I do think that list is important. And we hear over and over again, especially with younger generations. I'm Gen X, but millennials and Gen Z certainly feeling like their day-to-day work life is meaningful. They're contributing something. bigger than just themselves or bigger than just a paycheck is really important. And I think successful organizations that have recognized that and focused on that sense of meaningful work and also belonging, I belong here, are two very important aspects of the workplace, and especially for younger generations that are now moving into the workplace, moving into leadership positions. Again, I come from sort of the risk management perspective because I handle litigation. I handle the cases that didn't go so well in the workplace. And one of the areas that I think employers have to be careful. So it's a tightrope. You want to be concerned about the mental health of your individual workers and your workplace, but at the same time, you have limitations legally under the Americans with Disabilities Act on how much you can get into somebody's medical information, including their mental and emotional and psychological health. So situations that I've seen resulting in ADA claims are there may have been a coaching session. At the end of the session, the HR manager or supervisor says, why don't you call our Talkspace hotline? Why don't you explore this more with EPA? And that now looks like you're discriminating against me based on a disability. Either I have a disability or you regard me as having a disability. So employers can only go so far into really getting into somebody's mental and emotional and psychological health and trying to offer opportunities. So on the one hand, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So you have
no
to. No
good deed goes unpunished.
Or also a rule of employment law. The intention very much may be this person clearly needs a little bit of emotional or psychological support, so I'm going to move them in that direction. But that can be a violation of the ADA. And I've also seen other cases, and these are really difficult cases for the employer, where an employee may be threatening self-harm. Yeah. And the employer knows it, the threat has been made in the workplace, but the employer cannot get into that with the employee. And so that is also a minefield. And oftentimes that's where, a threat of self-harm may manifest is in the workplace.
That's true.
And so those are areas where I caution employers to proceed very carefully because of what they can and cannot question or get into with an employee under the ADA.
Great points. I mean, it's clearly an important conversation because mental health impacts the workforce and productivity, but there's balance to what you're saying. Employers can be empathetic, but employers also need to make sure that they're not doing anything that's going to get them in legal hot water. So, just to maybe kind of wrap up here, as far as the framework from the Surgeon General, why it's important, and the thing that I like about it, it's really talking about culture, and it's really talking about leadership. And most of us spend more time at work and with our colleagues than we do even with our own families. So just taking a little bit of a pivot here. So when it comes to tackling it in the workforce, good intentions aren't enough. Real change really requires infrastructure, updated policies, dedicated budgets, leaders who model healthy behavior. And for the purpose of the episode, I'm not going to dive into, all the policies and the different areas there. I do want to touch on, because there's been a higher increase in claims in 2023, the EEOC did release new guidelines for employers. And so we're not going to get into ADA or FMLA, the things that employers can extend to employees who are having issues. But I really want to lean a little bit more into the modeling the healthy behaviors. And, just a bit of a personal story. I've been on both sides where I've been the employee who had a leader who was modeling poor behavior. And, I ended up being the leader that was modeling poor behavior, right? Lots of lessons to learn there. But maybe without getting into too many details, in a previous life of mine, I found myself in a situation where we had a surprise visit, needed to spend a lot of time at work, had aging parents coming into town that I hadn't seen for years. And it was a balance. I was spending a lot of time at work and having a lot of unpleasant conversations with family who wanted to spend time. And it is seared in my brain. I remember specifically I'd been at work really early that day, leaving the office, and I walk past one of my supervisors, and they look at me and say, "Are you leaving?" I said, "You know what? I'm sick if I stay, and I'm sick if I leave." And the visit was fine and no issues there. But fast forward, being somebody who had employees working underneath me, I had an employee in a situation that I met that situation with lack of empathy. And a supervisor of mine had overheard the conversation, and I'm so grateful that they pulled me aside, sat me down, what's going on? Do you not think that, this person, that they're not going through a hard time? Do you think that you could have, better handled that situation? Such a gift to me, but such an eye-opener that leaders that model poor behavior are going to create more leaders who model poor behavior. So,
no question.
Yeah.
Yeah, what else could you expect?
Yeah. So, really the only way to break it is, have awareness and, be willing to be honest about a person's own role in modeling that. So jumping to maybe some actionable takeaways here. And again, there's so many things that we could tackle. And I know we've talked about AI, how AI, is creating an uptick. We've talked about the Surgeon General's framework that organizations should be modeling. But I want to talk about, I'm going to throw a question to everybody here. What is something you recommend an organization does to, better help support mental health? I'm going to start with you, Rod.
Okay, so I've been in the employment space for a long time, and I'm a workaholic. So yeah, I can introduce myself. Hi, I'm Rod, and I'm a workaholic. But so hard driving, I've probably modeled some of those bad behaviors. Rarely took vacation. So the point I'd like to make, I think the employer and that manager needs to make taking the vacation okay. It cannot be taboo to be gone for a week or two. You need to encourage your people to use those balances and allow them to check out. I've been the hero where I've taken my laptop with me literally to the beach in Hawaii under a towel so I could keep up on work stuff while my family played. I'm not proud of that. But you need to, again, encourage the use of vacation and allow people to fully check out. I learned that from my colleagues from overseas when I got into the global side of HR. They would leave. Maybe it was a parental leave where they had paid parental leave for 6 months. We didn't hear from them. And they didn't check in, and they didn't worry about catching up on emails when they got back. The times I've done that, I've had legitimately refreshing escapes. So I would say encourage that use of the vacation time, those employees, but make it like a real break.
Yeah. Solid advice. I had a colleague once tell me, when you go, nobody's going to be standing at your funeral saying you worked really hard for the company.
That's true.
Steve, what about you?
I saw a cartoon once, was a hearse with a bunch of goods tied to the top of it on the way to the graveyard in the funeral procession. Like, I am taking this stuff with me. Yeah, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
One word one thought about how do we improve this in the workplace. We make tools available, and we talk about it. We want you to take PTO. You've earned your PTO, and we'd like you to take it. And just saying these sorts of things in conversation or in group settings and having tools available and promoting the use of those tools. If you not only model it, obviously very important, Rod, but also spend money to provide tools for the employees as a part of the benefits program, and then talk about it. It makes it kind of okay. Yeah. Just like modeling the behavior, it makes it okay to use it and to be aware of it. Agreed.
Kathleen, how would you recommend an organization? What can they do to better support mental health?
I think the word that and the intent that I think an employer should have is authenticity. So there may be different programs that an employer, does a wellness program, or maybe, a affinity groups within their organization, or, a community activity to bring everybody together and provide that meaning to what you're doing at your job and with the people that you work for. Whatever it is that you offer, I think the intent should really be this is an authentic opportunity for us to get together. This is an authentic attempt to appreciate our differences. This is an authentic attempt to discuss mental health and well-being and life-work balance. So I think, and that comes from the leadership, that it's an authentic intent to encourage belonging, meaning, and mental health, not just checking the boxes. And, we saw a lot, especially in the early 2020s, where there was a lot of competition for talent. I think wellness programs sprung up all over the place. And a lot of it was to attract new talent, and that was the intent behind it. And I don't know how well they're doing now, but I think employees know when leadership is making an authentic attempt with authentic intentions to encourage the belonging, the meaning, and the life-work balance. And so whatever it is that you decide to do, whatever that fits your organization, be really clear in your intentions that it's authenticity for their mental health, not just checking a box or making yourself more attractive to new talent.
Yeah. Two great words. Authenticity. We were talking about this earlier. People know when you're not being authentic.
Absolutely.
And intention. Absolutely. So maybe my final thought on it, my recommendation would be don't try to solve your employees' mental health issues, but, what I've already said, what everybody's already said, model healthy behaviors. In the end, you can be empathetic, but you can still uphold your workplace policies and be respected for it by your employees. So I'm going to throw a lightning round here. I want everybody, going to start with you, Rod, Steve, then Kathleen, one word to describe the state of workplace mental health today.
Challenging is the word that comes to mind.
I'd go with changing.
It's a lightning round. I'm going to say chaotic.
Okay. I like it. A lot of words that start with C.
So far.
Evolving.
Oh.
That's a good one.
Okay. Another one. Most overrated workplace wellness perk. Again, starting with you, Rod, Steve, and Kathleen.
At the risk of being very unpopular, unlimited PTO.
Ooh.
Meaning that if you take unlimited PTO, you're going to lose your job. So I think the more traditional accruals where you've got your entitlement, there's so many studies that just show that unlimited PTO is not really unlimited. Obviously, if you take unlimited, you lose your job. But I think that's a little overrated. It doesn't tend to give what it appears it might.
I agree.
The studies also show that the better employees take less than they would have had you given them a specific accrual.
True.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem to be working. I would say EAP. It's more of table stakes now. If you don't have it, something's wrong. So
utilization is like in the single digits, like 6-7% in organizations too. It's good to have, but nobody uses it.
It doesn't really seem to be helping people.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Rod. It's the unlimited PTO.
There we go.
Sure.
So I'll be popular at least here. Yeah.
Validated. I threw something totally different. I put game table, which I recognize.
But not ping pong? No, just kidding.
Pickleball court. So
Free BMWs?
yes.
Overrated.
That's not overrated.
Okay, so another question for you. One thing every manager should say or ask someone on their team this week. Starting with you again, Rod.
I go back to, I had a leader one time stop me in the hall and say, how you doing? And I said, fine. Just did the cursory, like, flyby, right? How are you doing? But he said, no, how are you doing really? And just showed a genuine interest in knowing how I was really doing. It was a stressful time. He was aware of that. And we had a good heart-to-heart talk that would not have happened had he not added that one word at the end. How are you doing really? And created the space. So I would say that's something a leader needs to do occasionally with their team.
I think this is really important, and I value your question. I would take it more on a personal, individual basis. When I see one of our employees, I try to think of something that has to do specifically with them. Like one of our employees had a sick dog, and I saw her, and I said, the dog's name's Coco. So I said, how's Coco doing? So finding something that's specifically important to them like that, I think is helpful.
I love the check-ins that both of you have mentioned, but I would also say sometimes, in the workplace, you're going to have a frustration, you're going to have a disappointment, you're going to have a failure, and if you're the leader of that team, talk to your folks about that. Talk to the people who, how are you feeling about this? Name the feeling. I too am frustrated. I too am disappointed. But here's how I'm working through it. That certainly is, just because you're the leader and the buck stops with you. That disappointment doesn't stop with you. That frustration doesn't stop with you. And I think it's very helpful to those on your team to. It's a little bit of modeling, and it's a little bit of acknowledgement that this is how I'm feeling and how I'm working through it. How are you feeling too? And I find that when you have those conversations, sometimes the person is taking the hit a lot harder than even you are, and you've given them some space to just express that frustration with you and work through, okay, this was disappointing for us, but this is how we feel about it, and this is how we're going to move forward.
Love it.
There's something magic, isn't there, about acknowledging people's feelings?
Validates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have feelings and they matter, they're important, and thanks for sharing them.
And I think that person can also feel safe that, you're going through something together.
Yeah.
And, maybe they were taking on more of the disappointment, more of the frustration, more of the failure. And, by acknowledging that and acknowledging how you're feeling, letting them acknowledge how they feel, it becomes more of we're a team. We're in the boat. We're all paddling together, and sometimes we experience these, frustrations, but we keep moving forward as a team.
I like it.
I went a little different direction. What do you need from me to better support you in your role? I think sometimes, pressure outside of the work bleeds into inside of the work, and if things aren't going right, I think that's a good, simple question to ask.
A raise would be nice.
It was
That
just
free car
theoretical.
you were talking
Yeah,
I didn't really mean it.
So I'm going to wrap this up here. So the healthiest workplaces, they're not defined by perks. They're defined by psychological safety, right? I think that's what we've been talking about here. Leadership, modeling good behaviors, a workforce where employees are comfortable to say, I'm not okay without fear of the consequences. That's a culture that every organization should be striving towards. So if I were to give listeners today just a few key takeaways, anybody listening thinking, okay, well, how does this apply? What can I do within my organization? I would say that you could start by auditing your culture. And some of the questions that you should be asking in line with that Surgeon General's warning, do you feel safe speaking up? And depending on the industry, do you feel physically safe? Do you feel connected with the organization's mission and with the colleagues? Do you feel supported in maintaining your work-life balance? If not, what would help you feel more supported? Do they understand how their contributions impact the organization and why their work matters? And then, are their goals clearly defined, and do they have a clear path for career growth? So I think that doing a workplace audit, I like to call them stay surveys, that's a good starting point. Doesn't mean that you're going to, tackle every mental health issue, but to see if one's culture aligns with what you're hopefully striving towards. I think that's a good place to start.
Would you do this individually, either talking to them or giving them a piece of paper to write their thoughts down, or would you do it anonymously for the work group?
I think a good way to do it is anonymously. We send out a lot of surveys for our clients at Stratus, whether it's using like a SurveyMonkey or some other type of platform. But I think you're going to get more honest answers if you do it anonymously. Mm-hmm. And that gives an employer a good audit of, okay, what are we doing wrong? What can we be doing better?
Mm-hmm. I'm afraid if I saw one of those, I would have mental health problems.
Yeah.
But, you have to be ready to see the results of those things. Oh, boy.
Yeah.
All right. So there we have it. Any other thoughts, you guys?
Just a very important topic. I think I'm glad we spent time on this.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay. Cool. Me too. Thank you for bringing it up, sharing your thoughts. For our listeners on Spotify or YouTube, you know where that follow, subscribe, bell stuff all is. So hit it, and it'll help the pod, and it'll help you stay informed about where we are and how to integrate with us. So, Rod, you're the presenter next month. How about a little bit of a sneak peek?
Yeah, I think I don't have a name for it yet. I might call it Coco the dog, Steve, because
how's Coco?
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about the leadership skills that are needed in this new workplace. It's a different model. It's not the traditional leader that we're used to seeing in the organization. There's a different leader that will be more successful given the needs of today's workforce. And so it encompasses so many things we've talked about, but I'm looking forward to compiling some of those things and getting everybody's feedback on that topic.
Wow. Leadership in the company is different than it used to be, huh?
It needs to be.
Yeah, better be, huh?
Better be.
Better be. All right. There you have it for Smarter HR for this month, and we'll see you next month. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.